I really don't like chosen one stories. Some special person who's more special than anybody else. If that's what you're hearing, why should you believe that you could be a force for history if you've been told your whole life that only special people make a difference? I love an ensemble story where people coming together become something more than they were apart. And that's what changes the world. So, for example, a different way of thinking about Martin Luther King is that the movement made him. The movement shaped him, right? The movement took his confidence and his skill sets and those opportunities and made it something much, much more. And it didn't just do it for him, it did it for the other people involved. And in about 5 seconds, I just told a very different story about this individual that feels different.
Hey everyone, it's Hildy, and this is the Creating the Future podcast. I'm glad you've joined us here today. This is a place for us to explore what really creates social change. What will actually create the healthy, joyful future we all want to live in? That question is at the heart of Creating the Future's mission. For over a decade, Creating the Future has been applying the question-based framework of catalytic thinking to demonstration projects around the world, talking with folks about the factors that lead to social change. Our end goal is simple: to help social justice efforts achieve more transformational change, all by changing the questions they ask. That is why I'm so happy that Phillipe Copeland is joining us for the podcast today. Phillipe is a clinical associate professor in the Boston University School of Social Work, where his areas of expertise include anti-racist education and practice through culture and narratives. An activist from a very young age, Phillipe's work moves back and forth from building the skills and confidence of individual activists to seeing the power of all of us together. Talking with Phillipe inspires me to think differently about the stories we tell ourselves about what it takes to create change. And so it is my joy to welcome Phillipe Copeland to the podcast today. Phillipe, welcome to the podcast. I have been so looking forward to this conversation. Thank you for being here.
Yeah, me too. It really got me thinking about a lot of things, your questions. So I'm curious to see where we end up.
We never know. We never know. That is the fun of just allowing a conversation to happen. As we get started, can you just tell a little bit about your story? What is it in your life that led you to be passionate about social justice?
Yeah, that was such a good question. And it really took me back, I think, to my childhood. Ever since I was little, I've been very aware of things that I consider to be wrong. And I remember very clearly in my mind, I would look around, I would see something happening in the world or in my life, and I would think to myself, that's not right. That's not right. And I would feel compelled to speak. That got me in lots of trouble. Because really, I was no respecter of age or title or stature. If something was happening that I thought was wrong, I would tell you. And not everybody appreciated that.
How old were you at this point?
Oh, God. I mean, really, I'd say from the time that I was able to sort of articulate, speak.
Wow.
People used to say, there's that saying that someone's an old soul.
Mm-hmm.
I never really understood what that meant. I came across as older than I was in terms of just my thinking and my feeling. And so I think that's where it started for me. And of course, being first generation post Jim Crow Southerner, having been raised by people who were survivors of racial fascism in the United States, I was very aware of a particular kind of thing that was wrong in the world, which was racism. I think that was the first thing that I noticed was wrong. And I noticed that I was treated differently because I was a Black child. I knew that was wrong. By the time I got to elementary school, I was very aware of these things. I was very outspoken about these things. I also went to a school in the South where they still practiced corporal punishment in the public school. And as you know from the research, there's a bias that happens in terms of elementary education, in terms of a preoccupation with the behavior of Black children relative to white children.
Yeah.
And so not only was I sort of an object of bias, but I was an object of violence, right? Because of this practice of corporal punishment. And so I think that that was really formative.
Yeah.
And I noticed that I was being treated differently than white kids who would engage in the same kind of behavior. But I couldn't be quiet about it,
Right.
which would get me into more trouble. They actually had a thing they would do. They would take you out in the hallway, and before they paddled you, they would have another adult teacher there, and you would have to tell them what you had done. And I would refuse to do so.
Whoa.
Which of course would make them hit you more. And I was too young to think of it in terms of protest, but I knew that I had not done anything wrong. And I knew that I was being treated differently and that that was wrong. And that this particular ritual was humiliating.
Mm-hmm.
So a couple of things happened for me from that experience, which were really about issues of power. The first was that the abuse of power is something that's always bothered me a great deal, and I find intolerable because of those experiences.
Sure.
The other was the neglect of power. And what I mean by that is people who had the power to stop something from happening,
Right.
or to stand up for what was right and would be silent and would do nothing. And so from a very young age, whenever those things were happening, I would speak up. I would sometimes get into a fight to defend another child because I couldn't stand bullies. And I thought, somebody needs to do something. And a kid would say, well, why are you getting involved? This is not your business. I said, I'm making it my business. Leave him alone. Leave her alone. And it really didn't matter whether I was going to win. I would take on kids much bigger than me. It wasn't very sensible. But I had this principle to speak up, not just for myself, but for others. And so that's really where it started for me. And I'd say that to this day, those issues around power, the abuse of power and the neglect of power, and the sense that when something is wrong, you're supposed to speak up, has always been part of what motivates me to do what I do. I can't be silent and I can't be a bystander.
Right.
I just can't do it.
You're at the School of Social Work. What led you into that field? Of all the fields you could have gone into, what led you into that?
My life has had a lot of plot twists. And so at one point, I thought I was going to be a scholar of religion, which was how I ended up going to Harvard Divinity School. I thought I was going to be an academic. And I ended up taking some classes about sort of pastoral ministry, pastoral counseling. And I had a mentor there who was a Catholic, but also a practicing Buddhist. And she said to me, I think you have a gift for this. I think you would be good at this, counseling. Mm-hmm. And it really hadn't occurred to me until she said that. And I thought, maybe you're right. And so I went out of school and I got started in early childhood education. I was a preschool teacher for a while. I was really interested in childhood development. And I did that for a few years. And one of the things I noticed was that many of the challenges that the kids were having in the classroom were really about things happening outside the classroom.
Right.
And I thought, I want to do something about that. I want to have some kind of effect on that. And I realized that that was really about social work and counseling. The other thing that happened at this time was I started working with adults with severe mental illness. People with substance use disorders, people who were homeless. And it was really interesting, the parallels I saw between the challenges of children and the challenges of grownups. It was really quite affecting. And I thought, I need to find a way to get some additional training and to nurture this gift and to make it into a craft. I want to make this into my career.
Wow.
And so in order to do that, I decided to go to social work school because social work has this really interesting combination of justice, of service, and of science, which I found to be really unique in the helping professions. It was a great fit for me. So I went back to school, got my social work degree, started my career in social work, and I've been doing that for a couple decades now.
I've never heard social work talked about as a combination of justice and service and science. That resonates.
I think it's a really interesting combination. It's a powerful combination.
Absolutely. That leads to the topic of our podcast today and our conversation. It segues beautifully into your experience over all of your life, whether it is in the work life, whether you're personal, whether wherever it comes from. When you see change happening in the world, what are some of the factors that you see that contribute to the kinds of transformational change that we sometimes see in the world?
All right, this is great. So I decided to have some fun with this question. So I created what I'm calling Copeland's change equation. Okay, so I'm going to say it for the listeners what the equation is. All right. So it's confidence plus skill plus opportunity plus solidarity makes change more likely to happen.
Okay, so you're going to have to dive into each of them.
No, I understand. So that's the equation. Let me break it down for you. So one of the things that people in the social sciences, particularly social psychology, education theorists, other people, they talk about this thing referred to as self-efficacy. My area of expertise is human behavior in the social environment, right? And so we spend a lot of time trying to understand human beings and what makes people do what they do, what motivates people to do what they do. I'm particularly interested in what motivates people to change and to change their world. I'm really interested. So this is a great topic. And so one of the things that the science tells us is that self-efficacy, meaning two things. First, that you believe that you have the capability to act. And secondly, that your actions will make a difference. Mm-hmm. It's those two things. Those have all kinds of really amazing impacts on people's life, quality of life, health, your behavior, your relationships, civic engagement, so on. It's super important. And some of that begins really as early as when you start learning to be a person, that sense that I can do something and that what I do affects people, really going all the way back to infancy, right? So when I cry out, I can get a response. When I cry out, food goes into my mouth. Those are messages that you're getting from the universe and from the people who love you, that you matter, that what you do matters, and that even the smallest person can affect change. You can make these big people do what you want. It's powerful, but it's deceptively simple, right? And so if you develop that sense over the course of your life, that's how you're going to live. I can do it. And what I do makes a difference. Wow. The opposite is also true. So if you internalize the message that you don't matter, that you can't do it, and that what you do makes no difference, that's how you begin to live. And when you subject a whole population to that, whole groups of people, whole communities of people, I can't do it, I don't matter, what I do will make no difference, you really don't have to try very hard to control them. It's actually very easy. And that's part of what oppression does to people. It attacks that sense of self-efficacy. I would say that for many people, that's the first casualty of oppression, is self-efficacy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And that's why it's really, really important. It's a super important ingredient. And there are many, many examples of this.
Oh, it's such a big part of what we're seeing right now. I am just reflecting on what you're talking about. This is so much of what we're seeing right now.
Absolutely. So many examples. Think about what just happened in Hungary. In many ways, that's a self-efficacy story. Or if you want to put it collectively, that's a That's a us efficacy story, right? We can do it. We matter. What we do matters. We can, in fact, defeat autocracy. We can take our country back. And the powerful thing about that is that that didn't just affect the people in that community. That's affecting people all over the planet.
Right.
So self-efficacy is contagious. It's extraordinary. It's a powerful part of living. And that's why, in my experience, it has to be part of the equation.
Oh,
But there's more, because you can feel like you can do it. That doesn't mean that you have the skill sets to be successful. And so whether you're talking about education or human development or social economic development around the world, so and so on, you want to add that self-efficacy to some skill sets that are concrete and practical so that you can meet particular objectives. The good thing is that skills can be learned. They can be learned. And as an educator, I believe that everybody can build their skills.
So what kinds of skills are we talking about?
I think it depends upon the kind of change that you want to make. So, for example, when we're talking about things like, let's say, democracy, one of the things that people who talk about, let's say, civic education, they talk about the fact that democracy is an art. It's not just a way of governing. Like, there are skill sets that if you learn, you do it much better. You can get better at democracy. You can get better at being civically aware, civically engaged. You can get better at persuading in order to get power. You can get better at advocating for yourself or your community. You can get better at participating in decision making. And so there's a whole sort of pedagogy, if you will, of people who are saying, we can help you learn how to do these things more effectively so that you can have the world that you want. Other people talk about that as popular education, political education. So that's an example of that.
Sure.
So you got to have that. Now, the other thing that you need to have is opportunity. In my experience, sometimes it's a matter of timing. So you can be very confident, you can have some skill sets, but that the opportunity structure is still a little bit rigid. The opportunities to put those things into practice have some limits. I mean, you can certainly try to create opportunities, but some of that's beyond your control. And so some of those things that are beyond your control, it's sort of confidence and skill meets a moment where something becomes possible that was not possible before, and you're able to take full advantage of it. So opportunity is really, really important. When you think about it, that in terms of the flow of history, you think about various social movements, there are many, many examples of where it wasn't just effort, it was timing, right? Those things came together in a powerful way that made something more possible than it was before. And paradigms shifted, lives changed. But opportunity is super important.
Give us an example of where you see that. Historically or currently. A million are coming to my mind, but I'm curious what you're thinking about.
There's so many
one of the
examples.
things that popped directly to my mind as you were talking about it was the murder of George Floyd.
Yes.
That created such a moment and such an opportunity for people to step in.
Yes, absolutely.
And so much of the anti-racism movement that we are seeing now was sparked at that moment.
Yeah, I agree with that. And I would actually go back a little bit further to Trayvon Martin. Because in a way you could see what happened with George Floyd as sort of a culmination of really a decade of people looking around and saying this is unacceptable. And we can do something about this, and we will do something about this. And getting in the streets and getting in the halls of power and saying, we don't want this to happen to another child. We want our kids to make it home at the end of the night. And in some ways, I think that groundwork, that upswell, that pushing, that passion, that ongoing engagement made what happened with George Floyd more possible and even more
Yeah.
powerful because so much ground had been laid. And it's interesting how many people are talking about what we saw in Minneapolis and saying that the organizing around George Floyd
Yeah.
actually made it more possible for Minneapolis to stand up to ICE in the way that it did because they'd already had a couple of years of coming together across difference and deciding that we care for each other so much. Never again. So that's actually a really good example of people developing confidence, finding their power, building their skill sets, and then a new threat came and they were ready.
Yeah. Yeah.
they
Yeah.
were much better prepared than they were when George Floyd was killed. A lot of people have been making the connection between George Floyd and what we saw in Minneapolis with ICE
Yeah.
and really saying that George Floyd prepared this community to stand up to ICE in a way that they might not have been able to do. That's such a good example.
Awesome.
And then, of course, that connects to the issue of
Of
solidarity.
solidarity, of course. Yeah.
Because when you have numbers, you can do more together than we can do alone. There's a saying that's a tribute to Africa that says, if you want to go fast, go alone. If you want to go far, go together.
Sure.
And I think that what we saw in Minneapolis was people saying, we're going to go together. And I'm going to stand up for people I don't even know. And I don't have to care, but I do. And I feel empowered to act in the face of fear, in the face of brutality, and in the face of murder. People still kept coming out. They didn't go home. They didn't shut the door. After Renee Good, they didn't shut their doors and lock their windows. After Alex Preddy, they kept coming. Extraordinary. I have absolutely no doubt. I've said this many times. People are going to talk about Minneapolis the way that we talk about Selma.
I think so.
In the future.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Turning point in the history of this country that's going to shine, is going to shine for all time. So proud of them. Extraordinary.
Yeah. Now, do you see this as a continuum of these components? Do you see that one has to happen before the other?
No, it's not linear.
Okay.
They sort of bounce off of each other. It's almost like it's like a chemical reaction. If you put these things together, change tends to become more possible, not inevitable,
Right.
but the likelihood of change goes up significantly. Absolutely.
I can definitely see where a group coming together realizes they need skills. It really is all interdependent.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, absolutely. There's a powerful chemistry there.
So now, do you teach any of this stuff in your role at BU?
Yeah, this is what I do for a living. I have the best job ever.
Wow. Wow. Can I take your class?
I get to help people learn how to help people and to change the world for a living. I can't think of anything that I would rather do with my life. So yeah, I'm really, really fortunate. And we learn together. We learn together through practice, through struggle, through study, through training. It really is contagious. Experiencing adults have that moment, that child moment of, I can do this. I can make a difference. I am somebody, as the minister said. And not only am I somebody, I can do something to change my world for the better, or to help someone else to change their world for the better. There is nothing like it.
We experience that so much at Creating the Future because our work is all about the questions that people ask. And it's one thing for folks to cognitively say, yeah, that question makes sense. But when they go out and they play with it and they come back and they go, oh my gosh, just that one question made such a difference. When we asked it, when we asked what the problem was, people got stuck in the problem. And when we asked what was possible, they lit up. And you just watched. There is, as you said, there's that childlike joy But there's also the
Mm-hmm.
joy, almost the parental joy of
Mm-hmm.
watching folks light up like that. There's something really powerful in that.
Yeah, I think both for learners and for educators, those moments they're life-changing moments, they're life-giving moments. We're wired to learn. We're wired to learn. We're wired to grow, and we're wired to impact our world. That's what we do. Not always for the best. Not always for the best,
Uh-huh.
but we're powerful life forms. We are powerful life forms with extraordinary potential
Yeah.
for good, but also to do harm. And of course, and that's part of the struggle. That's that duality. It can really go either way. But when it works well, when we are at our best, we're beautiful. We're beautiful.
Yeah. It has always been interesting to me when we're in just regular conversation with folks and they'll say, that's just human nature. And when they say that's just human nature, it's never about the good stuff. We never
Mm-hmm.
say, oh, he saved the world. That's just human nature. We say, no, he stole a loaf of bread. Those are the things. And what we've come to realize in just studying humanity, my background is social science as well, is that all of the things that we ascribe to, quote, just human nature are the same things we share with the rest of the animal world. We're just animals. Well, once we realize we're just biological, physiological creatures, and the rest of the animal world, they steal, they cheat, they do all the stuff that we ascribe to just human nature. But when we look at the things that no other animal can do all of, some can do some of, but no other animal can do all of, those are the things that really make us human. So our human nature is actually the potential you're talking about. That's what
Absolutely.
makes us human.
Absolutely. And the capacity to be more than our instinct. I think if there's anything that distinguishes us, and I want to be careful because I don't want to talk like we're better than other forms of life because we're not.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that we have this capacity to act in accord with our instincts, but also to do more and to be more. And people have different understandings of why we can do that or what that means. But that little something extra makes a big difference, makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And that is something that you can exercise like a muscle. You can get better at that. So, for example, we're wired for aggression. We need that for survival. But we also know that there are times when that's actually not helpful.
Yeah.
That's not going to help us to do well, and that's destructive. We have the capacity to learn to choose to not be aggressive, to be cooperative, or to be patient, or to be compassionate, or to channel that aggression in a more constructive way. I mean, those are all things that people can do. We just sometimes think that only special people can do that. We can all do that,
Yeah.
right? And we can all get better at doing it, whatever it is. But it's almost like our species has like really bad PR. All that human nature stuff, that negative about ourselves. And it's like, who does that benefit? Who does that serve? Sometimes I'll say to a student, who taught you to believe that about yourself? Where did you
Yeah.
learn that?
Yeah.
And maybe that's not true. Maybe you can be something else, be something more. And what if you could? It's the same thing when you're working with people who are struggling, who are suffering. Okay, all these things are true. And what if there was more to you than what's happened to you? What could that mean for your life? What could you do with that? And for some people, that possibility itself is like a revelation to them. And then when they start to practice it, they begin to see that change is possible for them, that they're more than the sum of the bad things they've done. You know, I used to work in the criminal justice system, and one of the things that was my job was to work with people to capture their story and to communicate it to the people who were going to judge and potentially punish them.
Wow.
It was really quite an experience. And so one of the things I would say to them is, look, the people who are going to judge and possibly punish you are going to come in and tell one story about you. And that story is going to focus completely on what you've been accused of. We need to make sure that those people know that there's more to you than what you've been accused of. And one of the things that would happen is that that journey would affect that person as well. And they would also have an experience like, yeah, I'm more than whatever I allegedly did. I'm more than that. And I deserve more than that. I can be more than that. There are lots of people doing time right now that's been very much part of their experience. Some of them have returned to us, and now they're extraordinary forces for healing, for education, for prevention, because they discovered that there is more to them than this extremely negative story that they're told about people. There's more to the people in their life than what they were told to believe about people in their life. If we're going to talk about ourselves, I mean, for heaven's sakes, why not say good things? I mean, it's not like the bad things aren't true, but there's more, you know?
Well, it's certainly not how you would describe somebody if you wanted to fix them up on a date. I have a dear friend who says that if we talked to our friends the way we talk to ourselves, we would have no friends.
That's good. I like that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I'm really struck as you're talking, Phillipe, about that combination again of self-efficacy and skills, because really so much of what we're talking about here is about believing that we have that power and then having the skills to do so. You're talking about practice. You're talking about folks who are in prison who are taking that time to create that self-efficacy, to develop it. And to develop is to develop skills. But I'm also thinking about the fact that that happens in a group setting as well, because as you said earlier, we have so many groups who have been intentionally marginalized, intentionally told you have no power. And watching that shift is different as well. I'm curious what you've seen in those areas, because watching it with one person and then watching it with whole groups who learn together, who grow together. I'm thinking so much of what happened, Selma and beyond, in the civil rights movement, in the bus boycott, in the, oh my gosh, we do have power. As Marshall Gans says, it's the power of their feet. They didn't realize that their feet gave them power. There's something big there in terms of groups, not just individuals.
Yeah, it's a solidarity piece. You know, change really is a team sport. And that's when the biggest change happens. We often talk to students about the idea of really teaming up, of getting out of a notion that they have to do it on their own. It's actually harder to do it by yourself. And one of the ways that oppression works is to isolate you, to separate you, to alienate you. So even one other person, you've already doubled your power. It doesn't take a lot, but it's like, is there anybody else who has this concern? Is there anybody else who wants to see the change you want to see? Is there anybody else talking about what's bothering you? Connect with them, work with them. It can really be that simple.
Wow.
I was talking about chemistry. Now I'm talking about physics. Even just like basic physics, it's easier to lift an object with two people than one. And so I think that life teaches us this kind of intuitively, that working with others actually is better than trying to do it by yourself. But somewhere along the line, some of us get it in our head that we have to do it on our own, or we have bad experiences with people. And so we don't feel like it's possible to work with others, or that other people are not going to be there for us, or that other people are not going to work in solidarity with us. I can relate to that. I've had those experiences as well. And I think for some people, learning to work with others again, rediscovering what it means to be in community and connection, to be part of a team, is really healing for them as well. Because that's something else that they don't believe they can do anymore. I don't believe I can work with someone else effectively. And I don't believe they want to work with me.
Mm-hmm.
But then you have that experience and you're like, God, I was missing this. I didn't know how lonely I was. And now I feel connected and empowered. And watch out, because we can do anything. That's really good stuff.
We live in a culture that emphasizes individualism. And
Mm-hmm.
you were half joking about physics. One of the things that you learn in physics is nothing happens in a vacuum. When
Yeah.
something is isolated, things happen in connection with each other. And
Mm-hmm.
when we talk about the fact that we don't necessarily have the skills to work with each other, we're not taught to work with each other, because what we're taught is to succeed as an individual. And then that grows into whether you're talking about nonprofits that are individual organizations fighting with each other rather than
Mm-hmm.
working together because the system
Mm-hmm.
forces them to. You
Yeah.
look at social entrepreneurs who go to pitch events where they have to pitch against people who believe the same things. Systemically, we have just created this
Mm-hmm.
entire culture that goes directly counter to what you're talking about. And of course, we don't have the skills because we're taught we're not supposed to need them.
Yeah. I think conflict gets rewarded more than cooperation.
Mm.
And so why wouldn't you do that? Right? I mean, if that's the message you're getting, is that that's what makes you attractive or interesting or powerful, is that you're better than somebody else, or that you can outdo somebody else, you can outwork somebody else. Again, you can go fast. You
Mm-hmm.
can go really fast. But it's like, well, I want to go far. And so why don't we reward the people who are going far because they are in fact choosing to go together? And so some of it is sort of the reward system. It's structured in a way that brings out certain kinds of qualities in people versus others.
Mm-hmm.
And so what you get are certain ways of living, right? Certain patterns of being in the world that are consistent with success in that environment. This is what success looks like in this environment. But then when you change the rules, or you break the rules, or you shift the context, or you start rewarding something different, people say, huh, so you value that? Yes, I do. I value that a lot. Could you do more of that? You know what I mean? And some people will say, yes. And actually, this feels pretty good. I actually am enjoying working with other people. I'm enjoying learning how to work through differences in perspective or difficult feelings. That's another thing. Whew, gosh, emotional intelligence. When I'm having hard feelings, what do I do with that?
Mm.
How do I deal with that in a way that preserves relationship or that deepens connection with others? I mean, if you're really, really fortunate, you get training on how to do that. You get experiences that support that. You have people who are encouraging that and modeling that. I don't think that's true for most
Well,
people.
it's so much of it goes back to the story that you were telling very, very early on in terms of we don't teach that to kids in school. What we teach them is if they are misbehaving, we're not looking at how are they experiencing life and why are they not connecting. What we do is we blame the individual
Mm-hmm.
and punish the individual
Mm-hmm.
rather than building that connection. I'm curious, Phillipe, what role stories have to do with this. There's a piece of this that feels like it has to do with the stories that we tell ourselves about how change happens about ourselves. I'm curious what you've seen there.
One of the things that I have come to dislike a great deal, and I don't mean to sound judgmental of the stories that are meaningful to many, many people. I get it. I really don't like chosen one stories. I don't like those stories.
You tell me
And
what
the
you mean by
reason
a chosen one story.
well, okay, so some special person who's more special than anybody else is what makes things change. We get lots of that in the
Oh,
culture.
yeah. Oh, yeah.
And so I've come to say, I love an ensemble story. I love an ensemble story where people coming together become something more than they were apart. And that's what changes the world. That's what changes history. That's what defeats the alien invaders, whatever, right? You know, it's a bunch of people it's the power of their connection makes something happen that they couldn't have done themselves. And there are many, many stories like this. And so I think part of it is, again, what do we reward? What do we hold up? And we do this with historical figures as well. I mean, you can talk about the past in a way that it's full of really special people who did special things, but apparently nobody else did anything that mattered. You ever notice that?
Well, Martin Luther
Everybody,
King changed everything all by himself.
right. I mean, everybody else was just a passive observer. They were a
Right.
bystander. They didn't make
Mandela, the
history.
same thing.
Yeah. And so if that's what you're hearing, why should you believe that you could be a force for history if you've been told your whole life that only special people make a difference? I really don't like those stories. I mean, first of all, they're not historically accurate. It's a way of talking about people in a vacuum, as you said, versus saying, so for example, a different way of thinking about Martin Luther King is that the movement made him. The movement made him. The movement shaped him. Because without the movement, he probably would have been a very thoughtful, smart, well-educated minister, ministering to a community like many people do. The movement took his confidence and his skill sets and those opportunities and made it something much, much more. And it didn't just do it for him, it did it for the other people involved. And it just seems to me like in about 5 seconds, I just told a very different story about this individual that to me feels different.
Very much. Very much.
It's so much different. And it's so much more about community and relationship. And think about all the people who that movement made them, shaped them, midwifed them into the heroes that we celebrate today, that would not have happened without that collective struggle, including the fact that that struggle started before they were even born. They built on the work of other people who came before. Very different way of talking about change. I mean, we could talk about so many things. So, for example, and who knows, we talk about somebody like a Renee Good or an Alex Preddy. It may be that future generations will do to them what some of us have done to King. Mm-hmm. They'll just become these saintly figures out of context. Versus they were part of a movement of people that gave them power, gave them purpose, that they contributed to, and who their deaths affected deeply. And you can tell that story and honor those individual lives at the same time. Right. You can do both. But sometimes we do this very different way of talking about it that individualizes these things in a way that, ironically, I think some of the people who we have done this to, if we asked them, they would say, that's not what I wanted. I didn't want you to put up a statue of me. I mean, thank you, but that wasn't the point. Right. You know what I mean? Right. I didn't want you to name a school after me. That wasn't the point. And by the way, if you had asked me, I have a whole list of names of you people you should have given statues to. Where's their statue? Where's their school? Where's their monument? Because I didn't do this by myself. We did this together. And I think it's a different way of understanding the story of change. And like I said, I prefer an ensemble story. If you like a chosen one story, if you like your Messiah story, that's cool. I'm not going to take it from you. But I like an ensemble story. I like a teamwork story. That's just me, though.
Well, you've got a convert right here. Maybe not even a convert. maybe we've been on the same page all along. It's absolutely
I think we have.
It's absolutely beautiful. I could talk with you all day long, and I am so grateful that you have been with us. I would love to know if there were one or two things that you think that our listeners could take action on right now, that you would love to see them just put a toe in. What might that be?
Yeah, that's a really interesting question.
And you've given us a bunch of tidbits so far.
Yeah, there's so many things that are happening, but I think something that you could do right now, and this may seem counterintuitive, if you have the opportunity to form connections with the people who have gone before us, to learn about their lives, to learn from their example, to mention their names often, please do that. Particularly the people who you may not have heard as much about.
Mm.
Those people who you haven't heard as much about, find that biography, find that documentary, and commune and connect with them and bring them forward because they matter and their experiences are deeply profound and inspiring. I think about a lot of people are talking about the Artemis 2, right? The moon journey.
Sure.
And now some people are rediscovering Katherine Johnson, right? Who was the mathematician, the Black woman mathematician, whose work helped to make these journeys into space safely possible. I would love for more people to mention her more often,
Yeah.
to think about her, to call her to mind, to bring her into your conversation. There's so many people like her out there. Find just one of them, learn about them, and share their story with one other person, and watch what happens.
That is the perfect note for us to end on. Phillipe, I am so grateful to you. This has been just delightful, and I hope you'll come back soon and we can talk some more. So thank you so much.
That'd be great. You all do some really great work. This is a great conversation about things that matter. Thank you.
Thank you. I'm so grateful to Phillipe for sharing his observations and experience with us. His example of telling a different story about Dr. King and so many of the other heroes we put on pedestals, it really is such a dramatic example of what happens when we change the stories we tell ourselves. As Phillipe noted, if only special chosen people can create change, why should the rest of us bother? But when we change those stories, when the story from the time we are young is one of joining together with others to make something incredible happen, that can change everything about how we view not just history, but especially our power to create a better world. It has me thinking about the stories we all tell ourselves, that change is difficult, that it takes forever, that it only happens incrementally. What if that is just one way of looking at the story? What if change isn't hard? What if it can happen quickly? What would it take for that story to be our reality? You can learn more about Phillipe's work at the podcast page for this episode. And if this episode got you thinking, we hope you'll share this podcast with your friends and colleagues and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. If you're curious about the work we're doing at Creating the Future, we encourage you to subscribe to our newsletter. Every week, we share practice exercises to help you put a toe in to shift the power of your own work simply by changing the questions you ask. You can find that newsletter and a ton of other resources at creatingthefuture.org. Thank you for being with us today and for wanting to create a better future for our world. We'll see you next time here at Creating the Future.